Hi guys, just here doing a video. It's been snowing overnight, so everybody's been thoroughly enjoying going up the garden and running around in it. Whilst I'm freezing. So the heating's on, the fire's on, everything's on. Trying to keep everybody warm. Pete's had to go to the nursery. Wow, you're always trumping. That was a big trump from Foxy. Oh my Lord. Yeah, Pete's had to go in and check all the heaters for the plants. Make sure everything is being kept above freezing up there at the nursery. So we're at home. Everybody's all snuggled up warm. Everybody's had their usual routine and we're all just chilling. And then I thought I'd better do a quick video on something that people will relate to. So I thought I'd do one on food today. You know, obviously this video is going to be based on what we feed ours. And that's going to vary per person. You know, we're not trying to force anybody down a certain route, but all we can do is give the information as to what works with ours. Yeah, so initially when I got my first dog as an adult by myself, he was a boxer and he struggled really with putting weight on. And back in those days, you know, back in the good old days, we're talking, you know, 20 years ago, raw feeding just was not a thing at all. But every kind of kibble I tried with him, it either didn't agree with him or he just didn't put weight on. And back then we didn't have Facebook or anything like that to kind of get information from. But we did have forums. So it was even before we formed the rescue for the boxers. It was just a community forum of boxer owners. And somebody on there, I can't even remember who it was, that, you know, said that they raw fed. So I thought, I'm going to give it a go, and I wasn't overly concerned about it. I just kind of spoke to the butcher and said, you know, I want to feed my dog raw. And I got the Dr. Lonsdale's raw feeding book, Raw Meaty Bones. I still got it. I've actually still got that book. And I did that, you know, that was what I read and kind of got used to what I was supposed to be feeding. So I started Saks on the raw food. I can't remember if I think I'd already got Toby and he must have been a little puppy. Oh no, I didn't. No, it was just Saks actually. Anyway, started feeding him on the mostly chicken carcasses because they were quite fleshy. So they were really, based on the knowledge that we had back then, that was really what we were feeding. So we, you know, I'd give him a chicken carcass for his breakfast in the morning, and then of an evening he'd probably have another chicken carcass, and I'd chuck a little bit of, I don't know, kidneys and stuff like that in a bowl for him, and he'd eat that as well. And he actually started putting weight on. He was so much easier to train. He looked better. Everything about him was different. Completely different dog. So that was it. I was hooked. I thought, this is the right way to do it. And then when I got Toby, my first Bullmastiff, which is about a year after I'd had Saks, we just put him on it straight away. And so he kind of had raw his whole life of being fed. So that was how I started with it. So we're talking 20 years ago. Sax was born in 2005. And back then, like I say, nobody raw fed. I think there was a couple of us, me and my friend Emma, kind of with each other's support network at the time with raw feeding. She transitioned her boxer and her other dogs, her poms, onto raw, and I did Sax. So we kind of had each other to bounce ideas off, where to get food, blah blah blah. And even then there was only I think we had Albion, who weren't called Albion Pet Foods then, they were called Albion but something else. And we had what was the other one? I forget the other name, the name of the other one. They're not even big raw feeding companies anymore. And you would order chicken carcasses, and they'd come in a bin liner, but a clear plastic bin liner, and they'd be full to the brim. They'd be spewing out all over. They'd stink. Nothing was clean. Nothing was done properly. And then never ever had any kind of bad tummies, anything with that food. I mean, people wouldn't dream of feeding it now. They wouldn't. They'd be disgusted by it. But it worked, and it was super cheap. It was also the one thing that did put weight on the dogs. The only thing that you got kind of minced back then was tripe. Tripe would come minced, because it was really difficult to kind of mince tripe yourself. Sorry, that's my washing machine going off. So yeah, that was the initial raw feeding, and over the years we've noticed as more and more people have transitioned, and I kind of kick myself a little bit for it as well, because we did push raw feeding a lot years ago. Now the vast majority of people do dabble in raw feeding, and of course that means that the quality is drastically reduced, because they're trying to fulfill the needs of the customers. So the thing, animals are being farmed for pet food now, whereas it just wasn't like that. You had the dreg ends of kind of what was left from the butcher. Your butcher was the one who fed your dogs more than anything. And over time, pet food, what is developed for the raw pet food market, is now done in factories. It's not done in abattoirs, it's done in factories, and it's processed and packaged in factories. At the end of our road, we've got the huge butternut box, which is a cooked food business that you wouldn't believe the size of the factory. It's absolutely huge, and the amount of people that they employ in the area, and that is for a cooked food that is extremely, extremely expensive. It's not a cheap food. And I just think, who on earth has the money to feed their dogs this stuff? Because it's just crazy money. But that is kind of how it's gone now. People want to give their dogs the best diet, and I 100% understand that and agree with that. But it has grown legs, and I mean, I don't even know what it's turned into at this point. It's madness, the pet food industry, and everything is a competition. So over the years, I've tried probably every food out there, as long as it's not extortionate. And the more a food costs, the more it processed it seems. And the quality, it's just not as good as it used to be. Can you go back to your butcher now and get bags of chicken carcasses? Yeah, you can, but they cost a fortune to do that. They've been shaved of every teeny tiny bit of meat. There's no just removing the breast anymore, and the legs and then the wings. Every bit of meat has been cut off those carcasses, which kind of means that you have to feed an extra meat with them anyway. So yeah, raw feeding has changed. It really has changed. And 10 years ago, probably 5 years ago, I would say that I wouldn't have even entertained feeding a kibble. But we're at a point, and we've got to a point where, you know, we've got issues with allergies to certain meats because, sorry, that's definitely become a thing now. So many dogs have intolerances of things like chicken, because it's in everything. And turkey, or it could be the grains that they're fed. Who knows why, but for some reason it's a thing. So we've had to adjust our feeding for those things, but also because we're not millionaires, we're not made of money, we can't afford to feed a kilo of food to a dog that costs £7 every day, which is some of the prices that you're looking at. I'm not going to name brands because obviously that's not fair. They charge what they charge, and some of them are considered organic. But some of the food, if you worked it out and you went to the supermarket, you could buy the food cheaper than buying it from the pet food companies, which is absolute insanity. But that's just the way it is. Things have changed. So what we do now is we don't just raw feed anymore. So we try and use companies that do as little processing as possible. So things that come in just a clear plastic bag is perfect for us. You know, there's no wishy-washy boxes around it. We're not paying for all this marketing type stuff. We're literally just paying for the food. That's my preference. And then we also feed a kibble, which is a fish-based kibble, purely because we do have a couple. There's one main one, but we do have another one that does have allergies to chicken. Intolerances to chicken, but full-on allergies to turkey. So anything, I have to be super careful with him. Super careful with Nipsey. So we do feed a fish kibble. It's a cold pressed kibble. My preference for going with cold pressed, it's not always, you know, we haven't always fed a cold press because it's not been readily available. What I try and look for is something that is super high percentage fish in a food. So the food that we're feeding now is 85% fish and the rest is vegetables and fruit. And we do it that way because it's when you start to add grains and things like that in, it doesn't suit all of ours. What we know suits ours is absolutely no turkey for Nipsey, no chicken for Spot, and then no grain for a couple of the others who do start to get itchy and scratchy when it comes to grain. So it has to be something that covers all bases with all of the dogs. because I'm not going shopping for 6 different foods. It's just madness, so I'm not doing that. As much as I love them, I haven't got time to be doing that. And also at feeding time, I haven't got time to be having different containers of different foods for different dogs, because at some point someone's going to get fed the wrong thing, and that's disastrous. So from a kibble point of view, everybody gets the same kibble. And I've got a little bowl of it here. This is the one that we feed, and it's by Sabre Wholesale, and it's a cold pressed kibble, and you can see how greasy and lovely and oily it is. Doesn't break down or swell, should I say, when you add hot water to it. It's decent size, but not too small that they're not going to be able to wolf it down and choke. So yeah, that's the kibble that we feed, and I forget the name of it. I've got a bag of it somewhere. I think it's called, it's the fish one. It's definitely the fish one by Sabre. Sabre Pet Foods. Yeah, super good. And they have that twice a day. So in the morning they have half a scoop of that. I mean, you have to bear in mind that most of our dogs are neutered. The only entire dogs that we've got now at this point is Foxy and Evie and Spot, purely because Spot hasn't been neutered, just because we don't want to make his temperament, don't want to change his temperament. So really we've only got the 2 girls and Spot that are entire. Ray's obviously a puppy, but he's obviously a much smaller breed as well, so he tends to get fed what the neutered adults get fed, and I always feed by eye. I've never done it any different. Always feed by eye. So, there's sometimes that Foxy, she's got a really high metabolism, so she needs quite a lot of food. And sometimes I look at her and I think, God, she looks skinny. She lost a little bit too much, and she's got quite a big rib cage, so she can look skinny very, very quickly. So, then I can up her food for a few days and see, and she'll start to put that weight back on. Whereas, an Evie, she's only small, she's not the biggest girl. So she doesn't need anywhere near as much food as what Foxy does. And her metabolism is pretty normal. So we just keep, we judge by eye. Drew is massively overweight, and I'm quite aware of that. She's spent her whole life being overweight, and she eats barely anything. Sometimes I feel quite guilty about her portion sizes, but she still doesn't lose weight very quickly, because she's just so lazy. She doesn't want to do anything. But she's not unhealthily overweight, so she weighs about 49, 50 kilos. She's not huge. It's just that she carries it all kind of across the back. So yeah, we give kibble in the morning, and they have a little raw food in their kibble in the morning. Or one of the other things that we do also feed is forthglade. It's kind of a little treat for them. It's super tasty, it's super smelly, and you can buy obviously the grain-free stuff. So that's the forthglade that we use. You know what's in it? I'm sure it is super processed, so they don't have a ton of it, but that is something. And what they'll have is a quarter of that in their food, in with their kibble in the morning, and it just kind of, and they have a splash of water in there, and it'll just warms the food. It becomes like a gravy then, and then they absolutely enjoy their breakfast. And then their evening meal is a small, very small amount of kibble and their raw food. And we've been doing that now for probably, gosh, 4 years, feeding this way. Yeah, and I haven't started looking for ways to change it, so I know it works. If I feel like there's something, you'll instantly know, because I'll just start changing things and trying to figure out, you know, changing my suppliers, or because I'll just feel like, oh, something's not working. So this obviously is working. Everybody looks good. Everyone's super shiny. Everyone's got great energy. And it works. It works for us. Raw food works for Bullmastiffs. I've never had a Bullmastiff look bad being raw fed, but we have plenty of Bullmastiffs look terrible being kibble fed. And I'm sure it goes for all dogs, but particularly Bullmastiffs, because obviously that's what we know, and that's what we specialise in. So we do know that it's a way to kind of keep them looking good, keep them their energy levels quite level, rather than peaks and troughs. Nobody wants peaks and troughs in their energy levels. And their teeth, obviously their teeth are fab. We never had an issue with any teeth, which is always a good thing. Their poos are small, especially with this kibble too. There's no fillers in it, so the poos are pretty similar to raw fed. So yeah, it definitely works, and that's how we kind of feed everybody. So in the morning it's kibble with a little bit of fourth glade or raw food, depends on how I'm feeling. Normally winter I'll go with fourth glade because I can make it kind of a gravy, but in summer some of them just want some raw food and no kibble. But we'll always do a breakfast with that, and then evening meal is their raw meal. In terms of supplements, we do add a herb mix to their food. Years ago I used to do my own. I just don't have time anymore. I'd love to start doing it again, but we just don't have time to do it at the moment with the business. So we'll add a bath mix. So we've got this that we use, which is a bath mix. Lots of herbs in this. That's what it looks like. That goes in there raw of an evening. Smells amazing. Then you've got green lip mussel, which is added every day. Joint support, we use the horse one because it's much cheaper to feed the horse than to feed dog joint support. And they'll have that in every evening, so they have normally about half a cap of that. The older ones obviously have a higher dose than the younger ones because they don't really need it as much in the younger ones. The girls will sometimes have the berries, some shrooms, the old ones that is, the ones with the reduced immune system, and that probiotic is what we use. That's the vet recommended that to us for the girls when they've had a season. So they get that in their food every day. And we also use salmon oil, which is out in there. It's out in the kennels, and apple cider vinegar occasionally. It's not something I feed all the time, apple cider vinegar. We do also, after a season, give the girls in case of any E. coli. Stops the E. coli binding. but that's another video altogether. So yeah, that's how we feed. Let me just give you a little sneak peek of the food. So this is one of the ones that we feed. Birmingham Raw, it's a good advert for them. Super chunky, not in anything fancy, not paying for the packaging. And then that has got peanut butter all over it, so I think that's been dropped on the peanut butter. This one here is, I think, a lemon tribe. This one looks like lamb. Yeah, it's a lemon tribe. Tribe. So yeah, that's the raw food that we use as well. They like it chunky. This is a little bit sloppier than this, but it's still pretty chunky. But this, I mean, they'll eat anything. But so yeah, that's kind of what we feed and why we feed it and why it works for our dogs. Obviously, everybody is different, and what works for your dog might not work for mine. We have to avoid chicken. We have to avoid turkey. So for us, it kind of, we're limited on what we can do, but the most important thing is to create the variety as much as you can in the raw foods. Some of them, I might sneak a little bit of chicken if I can get away with it, but I won't fill the freezer with anything with chicken in, because if I ask Pete to go and get food out and there's chicken, you know, he pulls everything out that's got chicken in, it's just not going to work. So I don't tend to have it in the freezer. It tends to be venison, lamb, tripe, beef, duck, although Nipsey can't have duck, but it's not something that massively affects him. Rabbit is a big one that we have, and all of those meats are super expensive. Chicken is the cheap one, turkey is the cheap one, pork's not too bad, and they can have pork. I don't feed a lot of it though. But yeah, there's most of the foods that they eat are pretty expensive. So that's what works for us. That's a little video on how we feed, what we feed. And yeah, we shall see you on the next video. Thanks guys, bye.